Hey, thanks for stopping by. Robert Kofed with Computer Creations. Have you ever wondered or wanted to use the print and cut feature but really didn't understand how that works? Today is the day I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, this particular job, we are going to only be engraving. We're not going to be cutting in any way. And so this process that I show you today is going to be strictly for engraving. If you want to use the print and cut feature and actually do some cutting, this process is not for you. So keep that in mind. This welcome sign that we're going to create is 39.5 inches tall by 5.5 inches wide, and it's just a little bit too wide for our Thunder Nova 35-100 watt laser. So we're going to have to use the pass-through feature. And so I thought this would be a perfect time to kind of catalog and show you exactly what the setup looks like. We're going to jump into LightBurn. I'm going to show you how to draw this sign out. We're going to go ahead and design it. I'm going to show you how to put in vertical text if you've never done that. I'm also going to show you how to design and place the targets that you need in order for print and cut to work. And I'm going to show you how to generate them, where to place them and why, and we'll go from there. The other thing that I'm going to show you is, because this board is cut to size, the targets that I engrave on this board I can't have show through. So I'm going to show you how to use aluminum tape in order to go ahead and engrave those targets but have it not affect the finish of this cherry. And so that's the process. I'm going to show you everything in LightBurn. We're also going to show you what's going on in the laser. This is a complete process. Stick around. Let's jump into LightBurn and get this project started. Okay, jumping into LightBurn now, I'm going to show you the overall project, and then we'll build this sign piece by piece. So the first thing that, as I indicated in my intro, this sign is 5.5 inches wide by 39.5 inches tall. And so I've created a rectangle that's going to be what I call my frame layer, and it's going to be a black color. Remember that color should be a function and not a setting. So black is going to be the frame layer, which describes the piece of wood that I'm going to put in the laser. Blue is going to be engrave, and then I'm going to also use green color as my score color. So I've generated a rectangle. I've chosen a font. I'll show you how to do this kind of a setup with your fonts. And then the other thing that I've done is I've generated a couple of targets here that we're going to use for this second piece. So what the idea is that we will go ahead and put the board in the laser. We will put the laser head right where this green dot is. I'm using user origin, top left hand corner. I'm going to set my origin right here, and I'm going to frame it to make sure that, at least for my initial engrave, that the framing follows the edge of the board. And what I'll do is I will convert this text to curves and only select the WELC and engrave these first 4 letters first. Then I will take the board out of the laser, I will slide it back, and I will use the print and cut feature to hone in on this target here and this target here, and that'll set the position so I'm able to go ahead and engrave the OME when I feed the board up into the laser like this. And so that's the overall premise of the project. It's real easy once you understand the concept. I will mention again that this process will not work if you're trying to cut something out. This is really only a process for engraving only. So let's go ahead. I'll jump back to the start and we'll build this sign really quickly. To build this sign, the first thing we're going to do is this workspace that you see here is from my Nova 35-100. So it's got roughly a 24-inch high by 36-inch wide work bed on it. And this piece of wood is going to be greater than the width, so that's why we're going to have to use the pass-through feature to get this project done. So I'm going to go to my rectangle tool, and I'm going to just pull out a rectangle, don't care what size it is, release my mouse. I'm going to change the color to black, because black is what I consider a frame layer. Remember, color is a function, not settings. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make sure that my aspect ratio lock is unlocked. I'm going to come up here, highlight the width and put in 5.5, hit tab. And then this is going to be 39.5 and hit enter. And I'm going to go ahead and lock my aspect ratio, and I've got my size of the finished size of the board that I've got that I'm going to engrave this sign on. And so next what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add text to this sign. I'm going to come to my text tool. I'm going to just make a selection over here, and I'm going to go ahead and spell welcome. It's all going to be all caps, so I'm going to put the cap lock on. And I'm going to go W, enter, E, enter, L, enter, C, enter, O, enter, M, enter, E. And you can see that it's very small right now. We'll go ahead and grow it up. The other thing that we might want to do, depending on what font we want, we'll go up here and we'll select the font that we need. And we'll get it a little bigger. And we can play with this as much as we need to until we're happy. So one thing that you'll want to understand is when you get text that you've generated, whether it's vertical or horizontal, you can come up here to this H space stands for horizontal space, V space is vertical space. And so if I wanted to grow these letters up a little bit, but I needed to reduce the kerning in between the letters, I can reduce the vertical spacing. And so that way I could go ahead and get these letters just a little bit bigger. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this in the middle of this rectangle, and then we'll play with it from there. So I'm going to make sure that my text is selected first. I'm going to hold the Shift key down. I'm going to select the board, and then I'm going to just use my bullseye tool, and that's going to put it in the middle. Now you can see, in my opinion, that the text is just a little bit too big for what we're wanting to do here. So I'm going to just shrink it down a little bit. Now here's a tip for you. If I wanted to shrink it down by percentage, these radio buttons up here is a way that you could shrink it. If I have the middle radio button selected, I could shrink it from the middle. And so if this is currently centered in the middle of our target, I can come in here and indicate that maybe I want it to be 95% or whatever. And I could looks like I had both selected. I just want the one. There we go. If I go 95%, it should reduce the welcome and not affect the sign. So that looks a little bit better, and it's still centered. Okay, so just remember that if you need to adjust the vertical spacing between your letters, you can use the V space. That will give you what you need. And so at this point, the only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my outline stays black. I'm going to select my text and turn it blue because it's an engrave layer. And then the next thing I'm going to do is create some targets. So I'm going to come up here to the pencil tool, and I'll zoom in here, and I'm just going to left mouse click. I'm going to hold the Shift key down so it locks it into horizontal. Mouse click again, and then right mouse click, and that'll disconnect it. Then I'm going to come up here to the select tool. I'm going to select that line I just created. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that it's about, we'll say a 1/2 inch. And so now I've got a 1/2 inch line. I'm going to hit Control and D to duplicate that line. So now I've got two lines stacked on each one over the top of the other, and then I'm going to hit the period key. And when I do that, it's going to rotate that top one. And at this point, I've got myself a target. I can go ahead and select those and group them together if I want. And at that point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this. And this is where you got to kind of select where your target needs to be. So if I group this right quick and drag this down, because we know we've got to start our project with the top of that board in our workspace. And our targets can't be out of that workspace, because the idea with print and cut is I'm going to go ahead and engrave the WELC and also score the targets for the next time that we need to move the board up. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to move this target. I'm going to zoom in here. And I'm going to say we're going to just put it like right about there. Doesn't really matter as long as these targets don't move once you get started with your engrave and your design, you're good. So I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate that target set, and I'm just going to use my right arrow and move it. Remember, you want these targets to be as wide as you can. That'll give you a better alignment for the second piece. So I've got these targets now. They're both horizontal. And again, it doesn't really matter where these go, but you want to spread them out a little bit. So I've got my target set. Now those are going to be scored, and so I'm going to color those lime green. That's my score color. And so now I've got my lime green targets done. The next thing I'm going to do is I've got to be able to put some aluminum tape down on this board. So when I score these targets, that it doesn't actually engrave anything into the board. So I'm going to put down some little pieces of aluminum tape here, a couple of layers of aluminum tape, and then a piece of blue painter's tape. And we'll go ahead and engrave these targets, and then I'll just be able to remove that tape and you won't see any lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw a simple rectangle here, or square. I'm going to size it. We're going to say maybe 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. Just so I know kind of where I'm at and what I need to do on my board. Okay, so I know that if I create an 1.5 inch piece of tape, I'm not going to interfere with my engraving. So I'll go ahead and hit Control D and duplicate that and come over here and make sure that that 1.5 inch is not going to interfere with anything up here. So that seems good. We're going to turn these into tool layers so they don't go to the laser. That's just a confirmation for me to make sure that my tape isn't going to interfere with the engraving. And then the only other thing I've got to do before we're somewhat done with this design and we move into the settings is I've got to determine from the top of this board to where those targets are set. I've got to take that measurement because I've got to physically measure with the tape measure down to make sure I'm putting the tape in the proper location on this board. So the easiest way to do that is just generate another rectangle. Just snap it in here, come down here, snap it to your target, and then just select that rectangle, and it will tell you the distance from the top of the board to the middle of that target, and that is 22.64, so 22.6. We would measure down 22.6, so roughly just a little bit more than 22.5, and we would put our aluminum tape to make sure that our score marks aren't going to go in permanent on that piece of cherry. And at that point, we're pretty much good to go. The only thing we've got left to do is to do our settings that we need for our engrave and for our score. We'll do that next. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and get our settings dialed in. So we're not going to have a setting, or we're going to actually, the only time we're going to leave this black frame layer on is when we first load the board into the laser. We'll go ahead and get this set up and do a frame on it to make sure that this initial setup is correct, and then we will turn that black layer off when we do the engrave. The other thing that we're going to want to do before we go any further is we're going to want to select this text, and we're going to want to make sure that we ungroup it because we only want to select the text. And then we're going to convert it to a path. And the reason why we want to convert it to a path, and this is an important point, if you don't convert this text to a path, you can't individually select these letters to engrave only the partial word. It will want to select the whole thing, and you don't want to do that because the only thing that you want to engrave in this first section is the WELC. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the text only. Just make sure that that's the only thing that's selected. And come up here to edit and convert to path. And what this is going to do is this is going to take that text and just basically convert it into a bunch of lines. At this point, you can't correct spelling errors or anything like that. So you want to make sure that your text is kind of where it needs to be and how it's spelled, because correcting at this point is not an option. And then at this point, see, I can select individual letters to be engraved. And that's the kind of the secret sauce of this process. So now when I get to my engrave portion, I can just select these and only select the first part of this sign. So we've converted the text to a path. We're going to come up here. I'm going to assign or set my settings. Now usually what you'll do if you've got your settings in your library, you can come up to your material library, make sure that your engrave setting is done. You can flip open your material. I'm going to just go with ply, go to engrave, and say assign, and it'll assign this setting here. And then if you need to, you can tweak it. I'm going to engrave this cherry at 400 millimeters a second at 50% power for both max and min. My lines per inch are going to be 317. Now this is going to be a pretty deep engraving, but I want this cherry engraving to be dark because the cherry is dark. And then what we'll have to do is sand off the residue, which there'll be quite a bit. So just keep that in mind. The more you engrave, the more residue you're going to have. And so that's going to be my engrave setting. My score setting that I'm going to do for engraving these targets down here is I'm going to go 200 millimeters a second at 6% power for the max and 4% power for the min. And the reason why these two are different is when we go to score these crosses, if these are set the same, the ends will get a little bit burnt. And so if you back off on your minimum just a little bit, it won't scorch the tips of your crosses. It just looks better. Functionally, it really doesn't matter. No air assist on both of these layer settings. And at that point, we should be in pretty good shape to go. Again, I'm going to turn my line layer off once we get the board set up in the laser and we frame it. Of course, the tool layer won't ever go to the laser, but at this point, we've got our settings in, we've got our targets in, and I think we're ready to go. So let's go ahead and next what we'll do is we're going to go to the laser, we're going to put this board in, we're going to frame it up and make sure our initial setup is accurate and ready to go. Okay, we've got our Thunder Nova 35100 on, opened up. I've brought the honeycomb level with the front and back decks so you can see that it's nice and level. The next thing I've done is I've focused the 2-inch lens on the board. I'm going to come over here and put that red light right in this upper left-hand corner. I'm just going to give it a quick eyeball. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that head left and right just to see if I've got it somewhat square. And you can see that the red light disappears back here. So I've got to swing that board this way just a little bit. So I'm just going to swing it this way, and then I'm going to run it back and forth just to make sure that this red light runs on the top of across the top of that board. That looks about right. So I'm going to pull this over and get this right in the corner, right up here in the corner, and then I'm going to push the origin button on the controller, and that's going to set our origin. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select just the black outline in LightBurn. I'm going to make sure that the black frame layer is on. I'm going to select the frame layer itself, just the frame layer, and I'm going to say frame. And what it's going to do is it should follow the edge of that board. It's going to get down here to its extents. It's going to come across and follow back the edge of that board, and it looks like it does. Do it one more time just to make sure. We're going to say frame on in LightBurn. It's going across the top, down the sides. It's just skimming the sides just ever so slightly. The other thing you notice is it comes down below where our two targets are supposed to be, so we know that we're set up well. And at this point, you want to be real careful not to bump this, because once you kind of start your engrave with this board hanging out, it's real easy. You know, I've had my dog with her tail come by and smack a board like this, so you just kind of want to protect this area. You're going to want to make sure that this top is down, and then you'll be able to go ahead and engrave the first 4 letters of this welcome sign. So you'll have W-E-L-C, and then we'll finish that once we move this board up into the laser. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and load the file and start the engrave. Okay, we've got the board in the laser all lined up. It's trued up. I've used the frame button right here with the, so I've selected this perimeter. I've hit frame here. I've watched it in the laser, and it follows the perimeter of this board just perfect. So we're good to go. So at this point, I'm done with the frame. So I'm gonna select it, make sure that it's off from an output perspective. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to individually select the letters that we want to engrave in this first section. So I'm going to just hold the Shift key down and make sure that these 4 letters are selected, and then I want to make sure that I add these 2 targets in my selection. And I'm going to preview it to make sure it's all there. So I've got the W, the E, the L, the C, and it looks like we've got the 2 targets. So we're good. It's going to take 15 minutes to engrave this first half of this sign. And at this point, we should be able to go ahead and send it over to the controller. Now, here's the thing that you absolutely have to remember. You want to make sure that you select you see where the origin is right now, and if I would have run this job the way I had it selected without selecting the perimeter, the origin would have been wrong. So I'm going to just hold the Shift key down, and I'm going to select to make sure that that outside frame that illustrates the board, because remember we aligned our red dot up with this corner. So you just want to make sure that the output is off on your black layer, but it's still selected, because this is where you want, at least for this first reference. Now, we're not going to use these targets in the print and cut feature until we get into this second section. So now we're in good shape. We're going to preview it one more time. We're fine. We're going to say send, and we're going to go top. And we're going to say OK. Okay, that's sent over to the laser. We'll jump over in the laser now, and we'll frame it up and make sure it looks right, and then we'll get this first half of this sign engraved. Okay, we've got this first section done. You notice that I just put some masking tape over the top of this. It just makes it so much easier to clean up. You don't have near as much sanding. I've engraved this pretty dark, and so you do have quite a bit of residue. So masking it for something like this is not a bad way to go. I've got my two score crosses here that you can see fine. And so at this point what we can do is we can go ahead and undo this board, and all we're going to do is we're just going to push this up and get it to the point where we can go ahead and lock in print and cut feature. And so that's what we'll do next. So we're going to go ahead and drive the laser head to this next target. And if you need to slow down the speed, that's something you should learn, and it's just a matter of pushing the speed button on the controller and then turning down your speed. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to turn it down to about 12, and now you can see I've got a lot more control, and I want that to be right in the middle. And I think that's going to do it right there. We're going to jump into LightBurn, and see, you can see that I've got that dialed in. And let's jump into LightBurn. Okay, we pulled that out of the laser. We're going to take this and we're going to move this up like this, so it's about like so. And so the first thing that we did is we took the laser head once we moved this sign up, and we made sure that the red dot was right here in the middle of this cross. And that's where it sits right now. We've just driven the laser head over right there, and that's all we've done. So at this point what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this part, we want to make sure that these two are not grouped, because that'll generate a problem for the print and cut. So I want to make sure those are ungrouped. We're going to come over here and we've got to group that one and then group this one. Make sure those are individually grouped. I'm going to select this one. We're going to come up to Laser Tools and go to Print and Cut, Start Wizard. And this is the first section that we're going to go ahead and set. And you want to make sure that you get that circle. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drive the laser head over to this one right here. So we're going to go back over to the laser, and we're going to just pull the laser head over to make sure that it's right over this one. And then we'll set our second target. Okay, we've got our second target. So we pulled the laser head over and made sure that it was right in the middle here. We're going to select this target and say set second target. And now we want to say no scaling, because this is already to scale. So we've got both of these targets set, and we're going to say no scaling. And at this point we're good to go. So now all we've got to do is select the remainder of our text and preview it. Make sure that that's what we're going to get, is just the OM and the E. We're going to say send, and we're going to say bottom. And say OK. And at this point, the bottom section is sent to the controller. We'll go to the controller, pull it up, load it, and run it. Okay, we've got the file loaded in our controller, so we'll just pull it up, go File, find Bottom, hit Enter, and we're going to frame it right quick just to make sure it smells right. So I'm going to hit the Frame button, and you're going to see that it's going to give me the outline of those remaining three letters. The other thing that you want to kind of pay attention to is, compared to where I've got these areas marked off on LightBurn, it's coming just below that, which is exactly what it shows in LightBurn. And at this point I'm going to go ahead and start my fan and get the rest of this sign engraved. And so let me get set up and I'll video that. Well, there you have it, another completed project. I think now if you follow the steps that I've cataloged in this video, you're going to be able to do your first print and cut feature if you're planning on engraving something like that. And this is something that is really simple to do. It looks complicated at first, but it's really not that complicated. Just go ahead and follow the steps that I've outlined in this video, and before you know it, you'll be able to create longer projects than what your laser will accommodate, and it opens up a whole new world in available products that you can provide to your customers. I hope this information was helpful. If you like the content, a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. Remember to hit that subscribe button. We're about 33,000 subscribers now. Let's keep growing. If you have the ability, hit that thanks button and contribute to the channel. It's those dollars that really make this type of content possible. Until next time, thanks and have a great day.